Hi, I'm Deborah Birnbaum, and I am honored to be here with Seth Meyers.
I'm honored to be here with you, Deborah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me today.
I'm honored to get you out from behind the desk
Yeah,
and in the daylight.
Now you have me behind a table. This is an incredible upgrade.
And with no drinks.
No drinks.
I know. I'm sort of depressed about this.
You would have wanted to day drink with me during this interview? Is that what you're saying?
I think I would have failed at the first drink. As I
Yeah.
joke, I have a Jewish liver.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at that.
I'm very proud of the fact that I can go pretty hard, but as I get older, it's the recovery is the part that kills me.
How much training did you have to do for this?
The training, I went to a Midwestern college in the binge drinking 90s. Does that count?
Yeah. It does count. So let's talk about late night. Let's start there.
Okay, great.
It's been 11 years.
It has, isn't that something?
It is something. It's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
How do you keep it fresh?
One, we react to the news as it happens. And so ultimately it feels almost like you're doing an improv show every day where you don't know what you're going to talk about until you get to work. And the other way we keep it fresh is we've just taken advantage of bad things to have creative renaissances. We went through a pandemic, and if there was any silver lining, it's that we let our show change based on our time away. And one of the ways it changed is it got a little bit more casual. I think we embraced the fact that we are the second late night show on NBC, and we gave ourselves permission to act that way. And that was all sort of born out of the pandemic. And then, the other, it's not a way to keep it fresh, but it's certainly a way to appreciate having a show is you go through a writer's strike and you just realize how much you miss it. And then you come back and you have a staff full of people who are just reinvigorated to attack it every day. And it's been very exciting ever since then.
How much can you respond to the news in real time? How much freedom do you give yourself?
We give ourselves as much freedom as we can, but we never want to get caught responding to something too close to tape time if it doesn't allow us time to fully process our take. We don't want to mention something just for to get points for having mentioned it. I think a lot of our audience watches us every day, and they have a understanding that if we don't get to a big story, it probably means because it happened too late in the day and we're going to get to it tomorrow. Now, of course, the price of that is we are living in a time where sometimes the craziest thing that happens on Monday seems tame compared to the craziest thing that happens on Tuesday. But, we're not trying to be completionists and hit every single story. We're trying to cover the ones that we think are the most important or are sort of serving the day's thesis. And we have no shortage of material, and that is
sad.
Both good and bad. Yeah, both good and bad. Yeah.
What does a typical day for you look like?
I get in as early as I can, which is usually around 8:45. And, the entirety of my day, the more of it that's spent on writing the show, I feel the better served it is. And, I wait for a draft of A Closer Look to come in and then just start pouring through that and, adding jokes, making edits. But it's a very, for the amount of writing we're doing, it's a shorter day than maybe people think. We tape a little bit earlier in the day. And so, we're just charging full speed ahead. There's no downtime. And, it's a mix of working on monologue, working on A Closer Look, and then I have my segment producers come in and we talk about the guests. But the longer I do the show, the less prepared I want to be for the guests. I want our show to be really prepared, and I want to have all the information at my fingertips. But it's really fun for me now, the longer I do the show, to just sort of be in the moment with the guests.
Talk about how you keep the interviews fresh. We all do these interviews, and you get the stars who come in with their talking points. How do you get them away from their talking points?
I think that maybe was, worse back in the day. I think there is an appreciation now when you are in the public eye that the public is really keyed into authenticity, and talking points, they can really sniff them out. So with our show, we do kind of promise our guests it'll be a good conversation. The questions will come from a place of genuine curiosity and hopefully intelligence, and it'll be comfortable. Hopefully we try very hard from the minute they walk in the door to have a vibe of this is going to be a good time. Don't overthink it. It's going to be fun. And, again, when you do it 11 years, it's really the nicest thing is how many people come back and keep, sitting down with you.
So who've been some of your favorite guests?
Oh my God. There's so many. I really enjoyed, Amy Lou Wood. It was very fun to have somebody on a show that you were currently super invested in that, I think we were the first talk show she'd done. Tim Robinson, who obviously is doing better work than anybody these days and is an old friend. That's a really special thing when somebody comes back through. Connor O'Malley, who used to be a writer for us. When he comes in, it's a delight. And then, Timothy Oliphant always wants me to mention that he's my favorite guest. And so I'm going to do that right now as well.
Do you get a royalty for that?
No, but he buys me around the next time I see him.
When are we getting that day drinking episode?
Oh, man. I don't know if I can handle it. That might be the one where I end up on the floor.
I see that happening for sure. Yeah. And then I saw you just booked Clooney. Has he been on your wish list for a while?
He has, and it was it was really cool to see him on Broadway. I went and saw Good Night and Good Luck, and in this day and age, you really do take note when you are blown away by seeing someone on stage, and this has been a very cool Broadway season for that. I was lucky enough to see Denzel as well. Jake's amazing in that play. I'm lucky enough to see him before. But that first time you see people that you have seen on screen your whole life, and then to actually see them physically perform, it's really, there's nothing quite like it. There's
nothing like Broadway. It's one of the things I miss most about New York.
Yeah, and it's a thing my wife and I are really trying to recommit it ourselves to, because we have I've been living in New York for far too long for as few Broadway shows as I've seen. But this season we did a really good job, and we saw a lot of shows, and you just never regret going to see a Broadway show. Whereas I feel like if you go to a movie and like halfway through you realize you don't like the movie, you feel like you maybe wasted a night. But like you go to a Broadway show, you just feel like you did something. It feels like culture.
And it really feels like the actors are performing for you.
It's nuts, and I mean they are. Like it's not like you're pretending. There's sometimes when you're doing a TV show in front of a live audience, like there's a tendency to sometimes think past the audience to the people who are watching at home. But with a Broadway show, it's just the people who are in the room. It's really something.
As a show that's based in New York, how do you feel that you can capture that New York spirit in the show?
Well, the one nice thing is everybody who walks through the door and sits in the seats, they've spent the whole day in New York City. So I think they bring the vibe with them. And, obviously a fair amount of them are, tourists who are visiting the city. And we really appreciate that they're using some of their time in New York to come see our show. But it is nice to be part of the fabric of New York, and seeing a live TV taping is, unique to really only two cities in this country. And we're New Yorkers. Everybody who works at the show has that New York energy to them. Sal Gentile, who writes A Closer Look and does an incredible job, is always late because of the subway. And, that's part of the momentum of the way he writes is a guy who is, got screwed by the F train.
For sure. So let's talk about A Closer Look.
Great.
Where did that segment come from? How did that idea come up?
I mean, it was very organically. I wrote sort of a longer form thing maybe in our first or second year. I think the first one was about the Greek debt crisis. And we did one. And then I think we did one about Planned Parenthood maybe a month later. And it was no idea that we were sort of building what would be like the linchpin of our show. But Sal at the time was a producer, and he had come from cable news, and I would bring him in just to make sure we're getting the facts right. And then it slowly dawned on us that Sal would be very good at writing these as well. And it was also the first time I was getting feedback on the street that had moved beyond I loved you on SNL. Like for, 3 years of doing late night, people would say I loved you on SNL. And, in the back of my head, I was thinking, it feels like they're not watching the new show I'm doing. And then all of a sudden people would start saying, hey, I love A Closer Look. And, sometimes it's really as easy as just listening to people to know what's working and what's not. And so we do it 3 days a week. And, obviously it takes up, the better part of what we're doing as far as written material. But it's a really exciting piece to do. And, it's being written as close to real time as possible. And also, even though oftentimes we're talking about things that are upsetting, we have created a space where we can take silly tangents and do half-baked impressions, and have callbacks to bits we did months ago, and it has become a very fertile place both for information and for us, comedy.
How do you decide what subjects you're going to tackle?
It's really, I feel like the subjects decide for you. By Monday at 10 a.m., we tend to know what we should be talking about. The interesting thing is we don't know Friday at 10 a.m. what Monday's show should be. And while that
makes me sweat.
I know, that reflects badly on the world we're living in, that you can't sort of game out 3 days into the future. But it does make life on a show like ours nice, because at some point you just let your weekend be your weekend, because you couldn't get ahead of it if you tried. And so I think we do come in Monday very refreshed, knowing that what is ahead of us is, going to be a very taxing week of shows. But then we give ourselves a break, because mostly it would be foolish to try to guess what was going to happen.
How much does that have to do with who's in the White House?
A massive amount. I would say it happens a massive amount. I mean, the speed at which we are back to having to rush to add, or even rush to tear up something that no longer is relevant based on the 180-degree turn that was just taken at a press conference, a hastily assembled signing ceremony. So, whatever complaints anybody out there has about President Biden, I really truly believe after 4 o'clock, literally no news broke for the course of his entire administration. And that was very nice, at least for the people who write our cue cards.
You got your own nickname?
Which nickname did I get?
Marble Mouth Meyers.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
You did.
I know.
Badge of honor?
I wouldn't say a badge of honor. I would say, I want to be fair. I think the guy has come up with some pretty good nicknames. I think Marble Mouth Meyers is maybe not. I challenge anybody to go back and listen to the podcast that I have just been doing, in which I am talking faster than most people, and I don't think I've stumbled once. No. So
we're talking pretty fast right now, the two of us.
It is a weird thing for him to have drilled down on, but as far as my complaints about the man, it's pretty low down the list.
No, I mean, at least he's paying attention. Is that a compliment?
I don't know. The Eye of Sauron, is that a thing you want looking at you?
Not so much.
Right? I think at some point you're like, I don't know. I also think I truly believe incapable of providing a true compliment.
Is it hard right now, though, given the political climate that we're in, where networks are paying attention to, what he's doing and vice versa, that there's definitely a conversation happening with the administration? Look,
I think it's hard for networks right now. Like, I would not want to be in the seat of anyone who's in charge of trying to run one of these things while you have, an incredibly, petty person who is pulling the levers of power. So I don't want to say that I think it's easy to be in charge at a time like this, but I also want to give credit where credit's due and say that certainly the people that are in charge of our network have not, given down any edicts from on high as far as how they expect us to be moving forward.
So you never pull your punches?
We don't pull our punches, and we also have no expectation that the audience we have spent so much time building up would have any interest in sticking around and watching our show if we started to.
It does feel like there's a lot of camaraderie in late night right now, and that
More
has
than
changed
ever.
a lot. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's lovely. And I will say, especially as we, go through these tumultuous times, and again, we always had a great amount of affection and respect for one another. But, Strike Force 5, which was our, writers' strike podcast, it was incredible. Like, the long tail of that is how closer we are with one another, and it's a really cool thing to have.
It's cool to see you as a guest on those shows too.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really ever. I'd been lucky enough, and both to have had a long friendship with Jimmy Fallon, but also to have been a guest on his show. But to finally get to do, Colbert and Kimmel is so much fun. And if John Oliver had the courage to have guests on, I would love to do his show as well. But he has. He's chosen another path, and I do hope one day he finds success.
Gauntlet thrown. Oliver, are you paying attention? It's funny having grown up with the sort of rivalry between the late night hosts. It feels like a chapter has turned.
The other thing I will say is, as a huge fan of those Bill Carter books, I do want to apologize to people who like the sort of, the drama and the feuds, and I apologize for the fact that ultimately we are giving you a more boring era of late night in regards to squabbles, but I can only tell you it is very nice for us.
But it also gives you a chance to evolve. It's not the same thing about, you don't hear the squabbles over guests, and the challenge feels like it's moved into a different sphere.
100%. And I think we all realize that while the formats for our show in a wide shot look similar, any one of us could tell you how different they are from one another. And it's very rare that I feel as though we are stepping on each other's toes in regards to material or approach.
What are the challenges you face as a late night host these days?
The challenge that I sort of task myself with doing every day is writing a show. I think that there are obviously challenges in linear television, and there are challenges, in regards to things like advertising. But ultimately, I'm not the one who came up and educated myself on how to solve those things. I'm very lucky to work at a network that has very smart people who are in charge of things like that. And so I just am going to write the show every day. And the challenge in that is the challenge that's always been there, which is you want to write to the height of your intelligence, you want to write quickly, and you want to be able to, when the time comes, perform it with an enthusiasm that makes it interesting to watch.
And feels like to draw in new audiences too and bring younger viewers in.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because even though, certainly new technologies and social media have in one way eroded what is your linear base, that's how young people are watching the show. So, when I run into a younger person who is a fan of something like A Closer Look, it's obviously very rare that they are staying up until 12:30 at night to watch it on NBC. But it's very nice that we're making content that people want to see as much as maybe they would have 20, 30 years ago.
So how much pressure do you feel to come up with new segments like corrections or day drinking? Or is it just more fun for you?
No, look, we, all of our writers know that it's an open floor anytime they want to bring a new idea. You never know which one's going to be a hit and which one you're going to want to do again. But the fun part is trying. And everything that has ever worked on our show has been born out of an authentic place. If it's jokes Seth can't tell, that was Amber Ruffin and Jenny Hagel genuinely realizing they were writing jokes where, their identity as the writer of the jokes was sort of working against me being the guy who told those punchlines. So they found a solution. Surprise inspection, which is a new thing we started, a couple of years ago, which is literally Alex Bays, the head writer, pulling out the most embarrassing jokes that our writers submitted over the course of a month, and then me reading them aloud and calling them out by name, which, of course, since the writers know I'm doing it fun, enjoy just as much as the audience does. So it's never that we sit down and say, what's the next big thing? It's more that somebody has a little idea that's based in truth, and then it gets its own momentum behind it.
And where did corrections come from?
Corrections came from the fact that people online who write comments in the YouTube section ultimately had a big problem with the fact that I said Legos instead of Lego bricks. So then I stepped out of the show once and recorded a short YouTube video where I tried to address this, and then it sort of became this snowball rolling downhill. And now every Thursday I read every YouTube comment on our show and then after the audience leave, we record a YouTube video called Corrections, where I address all the mistakes I have been told by our viewers, although the viewers who comment are known as jackals. And so I address the jackals and their impossible to please demeanors.
And have you gotten corrections to your corrections?
Oh, yeah. Basically, corrections is a snake eating its own tail, which I can tell you is called a Ouroboros, which I learned via someone in the comment section.
But it's certainly taken on a life of its own.
It's the best. And, again, the audience leaves, but then our crew sticks around. A lot of staff members come down to watch corrections. It is a very fun end of the week because more than anything, it feels like I'm doing a stand-up set about our show. And for the people who watch it, and again, it's not a giant number, but for the people who watch it every week, I think that they now feel very inside on the lore of the show and the characters who put it together. And it's a very nice little community that we've built. And, in this day and age, community is a pretty special thing.
But it's also you're being self-referential, I think, that people are really responding to, too.
Yeah, it is. And again, that was not the goal when it started, but then you do get self-referential. And, now, people send in, action figures that they've built based on characters I've, created, and it's a very cool thing. And the other fun thing is I'm pretending to be insulted by their corrections, and they are pretending to be angry at my mistakes. But we all are aware that we're just kind of doing a show for one another, and it's Yeah. It's funny how special a thing it's become in how it makes me feel connected to our audience, which is a thing that I really didn't fully understand until the pandemic happened. And I was alone in a room doing a show into a screen. And then I realized, most people are at home, many alone watching this show on a screen. And so that closeness, which I only sort of fully appreciated then, is something that we tried really hard to keep even now that we're back in the studio with a full audience.
It occurs to me listening to you talk, like the Seth that does day drinking is very different than the Seth that does corrections.
Yes.
It's very different than the Seth that does a closer look.
Yes.
It's very different than the Seth that does the hosts the show. Which is the real one, or is it all a combination of all the above?
I think that's the most fun part about it is, that we all contain multitudes, and the longer you do the show, the more you realize there are different parts of you that you want to let thrive in different parts of the show. I love that I get the first 15 minutes of the show is my time to shine. Mm-hmm. And then I love that when it's time to be a host, you want to facilitate other people shining. And that's a really fun, different skill. And deferring to other people and being there to try to help get the best version of them in front of the screen is a cool thing to do. It feels a little bit like, what I was lucky enough to do at SNL, which was both be a head writer, but then know that I got to be also the Weekend Update anchor and didn't just have to write for other people. Also had this time where, I was lucky enough to have people writing for me.
You've also been doing stand-up, hosting your own podcast.
Yeah.
Do you sleep?
It's been rough. It hasn't been the best year for sleep. And, because, again, I think of everything that I'm doing right now, I'm definitely the role I'm happiest with is, being a dad and being a husband. And so you have to put that first too a lot of times. But, I podcast with my brother. I podcast with my friends in the Lonely Island. And so those are, while they're tricky to schedule, it's a wonderful hour when you actually get around to doing it.
All right, what's next for you? What's the one thing you haven't done that you want to conquer?
Oh, nothing. I just want to get a good night's sleep. But, it's I feel really lucky. And it's an incredible luxury to have a show, especially in times like these where I feel like if I didn't have a show, I'd just be sort of muttering to myself as I walked up and down the street. So mostly I just want to, hold on to what I have and appreciate that. I'm very happy that I come to work every day knowing how good I have it. It won't be a thing where I'll look back and say, oh, why wasn't I happier when I had my show? It's the happiest I think I've ever been.